Hey, it's Mike here, and today, is Elon Musk right? We could be talking about a lot of things, but today this is a request for me to respond to Elon Musk tweeting and essentially dismissing a vegan diet as part of the climate solution. My friend Andy requested that I answer, is Elon Musk right here in this tweet, which yes, is from 2019, but still worth responding to. He says, quote, I support people choosing whatever diet makes them happy, but it's true that everyone going vegan still wouldn't stop climate change. So we're going to investigate the very interesting tweet that this was a part of because we do what Andy says. The new name of this channel is Mike the Vegan Makes the Videos That Andy Wants Me To. So we're going to be doing some climate math, putting a vegan diet to the test and looking beyond the US, which was not done in this tweet thread. Anyway, let's just go. First, just a quick word about my views on Elon. I view him as just a human who is gray in the sense that he is flawed, but then is also helping in ways like, of course, helping us get off fossil fuels. But a good example of how I consider him flawed was in response to him being accused of being a part of the coup in Bolivia with Evo Morales being removed for lithium resources. He just responded with the tweet, quote, "We will coup whoever we want, deal with it." Maybe watch Confessions of an Economic Hitman before saying that. Yeah, a lot of people more or less worship him, and some are probably already hopping to his defense in the comments here. And some even view him as the savior of humanity who will in the future bring us to Mars and prevent our extinction. And I'm simply saying all that to say that he has influence in terms of the attitudes he expresses towards veganism, for example, may be adopted by a lot of people, so I want to respond. And yes, I appreciate that Elon is using leather that is vegan in the Teslas and so forth, but I do not think that he's aware of just how far a vegan diet can take us environmentally. But let's get some greater context for this tweet, because really it was a response to this thread by a person named Preeti. She tagged him tweeting, quote, "Why at Elon Musk is sane and the vegans are insane." Of course, there were 450 retweets because F vegans, and this wasn't in response to any particular claim by vegans. It was just shots fired, which of course Twitter is gonna hop on and love. And it was referring to this EPA pie chart on US emissions, emphasis on the US here, saying that vegans focus on things like agriculture, which would make a negligible impact, smaller slice of the pie, as you can see. But when you're talking about food, doesn't it make sense to focus on agriculture? Dumbass. But the point is, Elon's tweet was in support of this notion. And yeah, he was like, he supports people choosing a vegan diet, but environmental stuff. And we're gonna dig our heels down into this particular chart and these numbers in detail in a bit, because they're very problematic, in my opinion. But we have to zoom out at what we're talking about. Global warming, climate change is a global issue, which means we have to be looking at global numbers. And the common argument that vegans are making is that livestock or animal agriculture in general is one of the leading, if not the leading, cause or contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, and this is directly from FAO papers such as Livestock's Long Shadow and the subsequent one after that. While the original post by Preeti got 450 retweets, one woman named Elaine got at least one like by pointing out this global issue, even to one of the EPA's own charts that was looking globally, showing that actually land use and agriculture is a pretty big slice of the pie globally. It now has 2 likes now that I liked it. And while we're gonna get into land use at the end, I just have to mention that saving the planet from climate destruction is more than just how much is being emitted. It's also how you can sequester, and you've heard of the lungs of the earth, aka the Amazon. And to date, about 80 to 90% of Amazon destruction is directly from livestock, from people deciding to eat meat. So that is kind of a huge point. Vegans are insane though. But one of the most annoying parts here is the logic of dismissing a potential part of the solution because it isn't the largest slice of the pie, which frankly is ridiculous. Now, the idea that everyone going vegan wouldn't solve climate change all on its own. Well, guess what? Everybody buying a Tesla wouldn't solve climate change on its own. Everybody putting Tesla solar shingles on their house isn't gonna solve climate change. Heck, stopping fracking alone won't stop climate change. Stopping driving altogether won't stop climate change. Getting rid of coal won't stop climate change alone, but doing enough of these things together would stop climate change. So a more accurate statement would be going vegan would help stop climate change, but obviously shouldn't be the only thing that you're going to do. Duh. But I really want to hop back to the EPA chart and EPA numbers in general, because that was what was initially posted and what Elon agreed with, and I think there are major problems with it. If you look further into the EPA numbers, you find out that it's only 4.5% of all emissions, that is from livestock in particular, so a smaller slice of that already small agricultural pie. And I have an entire video examining this in detail, but let's just hit it bullet point by bullet point so we can keep it relatively brief. And the first one is, those numbers for animal agriculture seem to be heavily lowballed. Not only can we see that they used older estimates for methane, which of course are emitted a lot by livestock, especially ruminant livestock, but it's also a closed book. So I went ahead and I did a sort of bird's eye view analysis, sort of audit, and that was to see roughly how accurate their numbers were. And I did that by simply looking at the production numbers for all of the most popular animal products that we produce, multiplying that by the environmental working group's emissions figures for each animal product respectively. And you can see how that sort of lays out here on this Tableau graphic. And all of those sources for production and everything is linked below. You can go through and check all this math. I have a spreadsheet where it's all calculated and you can access that and look at it. But the new total with those numbers, looking at it bird's eye view, is that we're at about 14.5% of our current emissions being from livestock alone. And I had to go further because that environmental working group beef number was actually quite low compared to, say, the FAO's number. So I created a higher end estimate using FAO numbers for beef, which puts us up at 22% of the current US emissions being from livestock, which is ridiculously high. But then of course you are adding those numbers on top, so you have a new size, a bigger pie. So we're looking at between 13 and 19% of total greenhouse gas emissions coming from livestock from my math here. And I have to say, this is a range that pretty closely matches the FAO's global numbers of like 14.5 to 18% from their two reports. But that is still not enough, which brings me to number 2, which is that methane is being undercounted by using a 100-year timescale for global warming potential in everything that we've talked about so far, including the model I did. Irreversible climate change is, hold on to your britches, slated to be about 10 years away, according to some scientists, as this UN page says. So we don't want to be looking at 100 years out. We want to be looking at something between 10 and 20 years out. And thankfully we can look at the global warming potential there for methane, which is, get this, between 86 and 100 times that of CO2. And that is at 20 years out or 10 years out respectively. Which brings me to another slap in the face, number 3, which is that global warming potential completely ignores the airborne fraction of CO2, which is only 45%, meaning only 45% of the CO2 that we emit through industry and transport and everything else actually makes it into the atmosphere to contribute to global warming. However, methane isn't being sucked up in the same way, so virtually 100% of it is making it up into the atmosphere. And because of that, we're talking about over twice the amount of warming. Really, global warming potential should be adjusted by about 2.22 times, which brings those 10 and 20 year global warming potentials to 222 and 191 times CO2. I know I'm just throwing a lot of information at you guys really fast, but the point here is that it would be a really complicated model to look at what portion of everything is methane in livestock and not livestock, and just reanalyze the entire global emissions. But it's based off this looking like it would be somewhere between at least 25 and 40%. Anyway, the major point, and perhaps the main point here that I want to make beyond that, is that going vegan frees up so much darn land that it acts as a great stepping stone for solving and mitigating climate change with land use. From the USDA, we know that nearly half of the lower 48 land in the United States is used for livestock, and globally we're talking about 30% of ice-free land, and that's some of the best land in the world. Veganism, of course, prevents an alternative to be getting calories and protein in a way that uses way less land, about 1/8 of the land, and can even sequester carbon in certain cases. Like from this chart, you can see nuts are sequestering carbon Completely different situation. In Elon's tweet, he also said, quote, moving billions of tons of hydrocarbons from deep underground into the atmosphere and oceans is fundamentally the issue. And conversely, I would say that taking billions of tons from the atmosphere and putting it into the ground is the solution. And guess what? When you're freeing up nearly half of the lower 48 US land, you have a lot of land to plant trees. And I have made this spreadsheet for a sequestration model in the US where basically the US in the current EPA model just goes vegan, frees up that land, and then based off the sequestration per acre average, we're getting to about 85% of current emissions sequestered under a model where everybody's organized enough to turn that land into planting trees, which would be awesome. With a carbon footprint that's only 15% of what it currently is, we could easily just reduce and become carbon negative. In the end, from the outside looking in at a tweet thread saying that a vegan diet alone cannot solve climate change is kind of like seeing a bunch of people being like, composting alone can't solve climate change, patting each other on the back, screw all those composters. But no, my guess is that the reason these people want to dismiss veganism is because they are actively supporting the livestock industry, animal agriculture, which is a very environmentally dirty industry. And they might feel a little bit guilty about it, but they don't feel guilty enough to change. And in this conversation, Preeti and Elon Musk and others have created a false dichotomy in which your only choice is agriculture or all of fossil fuels, when the reality is obviously we should be doing both, being more eco in both of those areas. Furthermore, it is just so blindly US-centric to just point at an EPA emissions chart and extrapolate that to the entire global situation, which is a very different pie chart to start with. And then on top of that, you already saw my case for why that was undercounted, why methane is undercounted and the real global warming potential should be way higher, and that we care about the next 10 to 20 years, so we need to care more about methane. So I'll leave you with the simple thought that if there were two Earths, one decided to go fully vegan to try and fight climate change, and the other continued business as usual, which one would have a better chance of survival? The vegan one would not only free up a ton of land to work with for sequestration, but they would also have significantly lower emissions. And that's whether you're looking at the FAO's figure and going, screw methane, I don't care what happens in the next 10 or 20 years, or you're looking at the data I presented. Obviously, that vegan planet's shot of survival is greater. Vegans are sane for wanting to not support animal agriculture for the environment. So to answer Andy's question of is Elon Musk right, I would say that he is right in that there is no single silver bullet that's going to be able to solely solve climate change, which is nothing new, but he is wrong in the sense that he was just dismissing a vegan diet as part of the solution, and also how a vegan diet could actually buy us enough time by freeing up enough land to sequester carbon that we could find another solution to solve climate change. So it could single-handedly end up solving climate change, but that's theoretical. Anyway, let me know down below what you think, and feel free to like and subscribe and all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.